My father trapped me in a Soundproof Academy and DRGGED me into obedience, then blamed it all on sensory therapy. I exposed him, got him arrested, and moved on. He just reached out after 5 years. My earliest memory is not a birthday, not a toy, not a happy moment. It's the taste of leather and the scream I couldn't let out. My name is Caleb. I'm 27 now, but this part of the story starts when I was just a kid, maybe 6 or 7, living in a quiet town in northern Vermont. My father, Dr. Elias Ward, was a man of strange genius and quiet cruelty. He believed in something he called mental purity through silence. Noise is weakness, he would say. Control is divinity. It wasn't just some personal mantra. It was a lifestyle. Our house was like a chapel of quiet. We had thick carpets to muffle footsteps. Doors were outfitted with felted edges. Even the faucets were modified to run with minimal splashing. My father had sound sensors installed in the hallways and bedrooms. If you triggered them, a high-pitched alarm would go off, not loud, but sharp, like needles in your ears. It trained you fast. I learned early not to cry. Once, I scraped my knee falling on our icy back steps. Just a regular fall, nothing serious. My instinct was to cry out, like any kid would. But before I could get past a gasp, my father was there, kneeling in front of me, holding out the leather belt from his waist. Bite, he said. I did, because I had learned what happened when I didn't. I remember the metallic taste of the belt buckle and the fire in my knee. But more than that, I remember the fear of making noise. That was worse than the pain. I clenched my teeth and stared at the snow, willing myself to be quiet. That's when I started to understand what kind of life I was living. At night, the punishments changed. My dad had rigged a system, tiny sensors in my mattress, something he called a movement harmonizer. If I thrashed too much in my sleep, or worse, ground my teeth, it would trigger an alarm in my room. A long, thin beep that forced me awake. Sometimes once, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a night. If I still made too much sound, the next day I'd lose meals. Silence wasn't just expected, it was survival. I remember my 9th birthday. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd make an exception. Maybe there'd be a cake, or a moment of warmth. Instead, he handed me a box. It was heavy, plain, and inside was a black leather-bound notebook with nothing written in it. Your ascendancy ledger, he called it. Every day you go without triggering an alert, you'll mark it here. If you stay on course, you'll ascend. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew he would be checking it. A week later, he started assigning focus values to food. Apples were 10 points, toast 6, milk 8. Every item in the pantry had a number, and I couldn't eat unless I had earned the points by being silent enough. He kept a score on his tablet. Sometimes I'd starve just because I coughed in my sleep. My childhood wasn't a childhood. It was a test I never agreed to take, and I was failing the parts one didn't even understand yet. It was a Thursday when I earned my first premium reward. I was 9 years old, and it had been 10 straight days without triggering a single sensor, not even during sleep. My father was particularly proud of the fact that I hadn't even mumbled in my dreams. He tracked everything through his control tablet, always watching, even when he wasn't in the room. You've done well, he said that afternoon when I came home from school. Very well. I was scared to speak, so I just nodded. That was safe. I'd learned that nodding was his preferred form of communication anyway, silent and efficient. That night, he surprised me. For dinner, instead of the usual dry oats or plain vegetables, he presented a thick-cut steak on a pristine white plate. It was grilled, pink in the middle, and seasoned with his usual meticulous care. Steak was my favorite food, and he knew that. It wasn't something we ever had unless we were being tested. Sit, he said, gesturing toward the head of the table. Not my usual place. I sat. He placed the knife and fork in front of me in perfect alignment, then stepped back and folded his arms, watching like a coach monitoring an athlete's form. Eat slowly, controlled, mindfully, prove your merit. I picked up the knife and fork. The meat looked perfect, but one cut in, and I knew something was wrong. It was overcooked, way overcooked. It was dry, rubbery, and thick like leather. Chewing it was an effort. Swallowing it without making noise was almost impossible. Still, I tried. Each bite took what felt like forever. I chewed and chewed, jaw muscle straining. My throat tightened. The meat sucked all the moisture out of my mouth. I made a quiet grunt without meaning to, just a reflex. My father's eyes snapped up. What was that? I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I didn't. The table flipped before I could finish. He grabbed the edge with both hands and flung it sideways with a roar. Plates clattered to the floor, the steak landing near my feet. The ascendancy ledger, which I had dutifully placed next to me for recording the meal, slid off the edge. He snatched it up and marched into the kitchen. I didn't follow. I knew better than to move. When I finally stood up, I saw smoke. He had thrown the ledger into the gas burner, the paper curling and blackening in the open flame. He didn't say a word. I stood there as the last page turned to ash. Then he came back, picked up the half-chewed steak from the floor, and shoved it into my hands. Finish it, he said. You waste nothing. You complain about nothing. My stomach twisted. The meat was cold now, covered in dust and carpet fibers. I brought it to my mouth, tears burning in the corners of my eyes. I chewed slowly, silently, every fiber of my being screaming, but not out loud. He leaned in close to my ear, his breath hot. One more sound, he whispered, and I'll make you hold your hand over the stove. Understand? I nodded. That was all I could do. And even as the tears rolled down my face and I swallowed the filth in silence, I didn't cry, because I knew what crying would cost me. I passed out during fencing. It happened during practice at SOUNDPROOF Academy, the elite boarding school where my father had me enrolled when I turned 10. He said it was a necessary environment for cultivating control. What he meant was, silence was expected there. Perfect posture, disciplined gestures, controlled voices. The school wasn't abusive, just strict. I actually liked the structure. It made sense. Unlike home, that day we were mid-drill, full gear on, the coach calling out steps. My chest felt tight. My head was buzzing. I hadn't eaten anything in over 24 hours, not enough focus points. The last time I'd spoken out of turn, my father said, "If your hunger is louder than your mind, then you don't deserve fuel." I was on my third lunge when my knees gave out. I remember gasping too loudly, then trying to correct it, whispering, sorry, as my vision blurred. The world tilted sideways, and then darkness. When I woke up, I was in the nurse's office. There was a soft beeping, machines monitoring vitals, and something even stranger, concern. "Hey," a woman's voice said gently. "You're okay. Just breathe easy." She was the school counselor, Ms. Lennox. I recognized her vaguely from assemblies. She wasn't wearing judgment or authority, just worry. "You fainted. Do you remember anything?" I nodded weakly. My lips parted, but I hesitated. "It's all right," she added. "You're safe here." And for some reason, in that moment, I believed her. I don't know what made me talk. Maybe it was the quiet in the room that didn't feel like punishment. Maybe it was the soft blanket tucked around me instead of an accusation. I was loud. I mumbled. She leaned in. "What do you mean?" I triggered the alarm last night. Grinding teeth. I lose points for that. He tracks it on his tablet. Who tracks what, Caleb? My dad. It's the system. You get food if you're silent. You lose if you twitch or talk wrong. She blinked. You lose food. I nodded. She didn't speak for a moment, just reached out and gently touched my wrist. "Do you have to earn all your meals?" "Yes. There's a chart. He says I can ascend if I keep score long enough." "And the alarms?" she asked softly. "They go off when I'm bad." I learned fast. She didn't ask for more. She didn't need to. By the time I finished that sentence, she was already pulling out her phone. I sat perfectly still as she made the call. "Child Welfare Services," she said quietly, stepping into the hallway. I sat there gripping the edge of the cot, every muscle tense, afraid to breathe too loud. But no alarms came, no punishment, just silence. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel like a threat. It felt like maybe, something was changing. They sent me home that night. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe to be taken somewhere else. Maybe to be protected. But after hours of interviews, phone calls, and clipboard checklists, the child services agents showed up at our house with me in the back seat. It was strange seeing the place from that angle. Our front lawn was immaculate. The flower beds were freshly turned. The porch light glowed warmly. From the outside, our home looked like a magazine spread for upper-middle-class discipline. Mr. Ward answered the door in a cardigan and reading glasses. "Officers," he said with a measured smile. "Thank you for bringing my son home. I trust there's been some misunderstanding." He sounded calm, like someone explaining a billing error. The woman from Child Services, Ms. Patel, stood tall beside me. "We received a report from St. Meriden's regarding potential neglect and psychological control practices. We're here to review your home environment and verify care." He stepped aside like he was welcoming dinner guests. "Please, come in." They walked through every room. I watched them glance at the labeled food items in the pantry, each can, each box with colored stickers and numbers. "Ah," my father said smoothly, "that's part of our positive reinforcement chart. Caleb has difficulty with task completion, so we assign food items as rewards for focus-based goals." The ascendancy ledger was nowhere to be found. In its place on my desk was a laminated chart titled Achievement Incentive Schedule. It had stars and check marks and fake entries in bright marker. The handwriting wasn't mine. "And this?" Ms. Patel asked, holding up a tablet. "His school tracking app," my father said. "Behavioral improvement logs. All approved by our licensed specialist." He handed over a folder, pre-printed evaluations from a Dr. Gerald Strauss, psychological assessments, nutrition reports, even an independent learning program. "Dr. Strauss has been working with Caleb for over a year," he said. "Feel free to contact him." I wanted to speak. I did, but my throat locked up the moment Ms. Patel turned to me. My father stood behind her, watching. His eyes didn't say, "I love you." They said, "Try it." When the agents finally finished their walkthrough, Ms. Patel turned to me. "You'll be okay tonight?" I nodded. She looked at my father again, then back at me. "We'll follow up soon." That was it. They left. The front door clicked shut, and my father locked it behind them. No yelling, no accusations. Just a small smirk as he handed me a blank notebook. "Try again," he said. Then he turned away, humming. And I stood there, holding the ghost of my burned ledger, wondering if anyone would ever see the truth behind his perfect walls. The next morning, there was something waiting for me on the kitchen table. It looked like a headset, but not the kind you'd use for music or games. This thing had thick cushioned ear pads, a rigid plastic band, and two blinking lights on the side. A wire ran from one side into a slim black box no bigger than a TV remote. I stared at it, unsure. My father sat across from me, drinking black coffee. He didn't look up from his tablet. "Put it on." I hesitated. He raised an eyebrow slowly. I put it on. Instantly, soft classical music poured into my ears. Vivaldi, I think. It was too loud to ignore, but just soft enough that it didn't hurt. The kind of music that felt endless, like it would never stop. This is called the cognitive enhancement system, he said. Dr. Strauss prescribed it. It's part of your updated protocol. I blinked. It plays symphonic stimulation during waking hours. Keeps your mind alert. Prevents auditory laziness. You will wear it from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., except during scheduled breaks. I reached to remove it, instinctively. He grabbed my wrist midair. No, you do not remove it on your own. You will learn a hand gesture protocol. 1 open palm at the ear means request removal. 2 means emergency. Otherwise, it stays on. Understood. I nodded. He let go. That first day, the music never stopped. Through meals, through schoolwork, through chores. Always in the background, weaving through my thoughts like ivy through bricks. He made a laminated chart of gestures. 1 for water, 1 for bathroom, 1 for I need to write. All of it silent. All of it filtered through performance. You're not being punished, he said at lunch. This is educational. You'll thank me when you're an adult. Noise is indulgence. We are eliminating indulgence. He started calling the headset the Strauss Band, like it was some official medical device, not something he likely built in the garage and forged papers for. It isolated me more than anything before it. I couldn't hear footsteps coming. I couldn't hear my own breath. I learned to track the clock by feel, learned to interpret subtle shifts in light. The world around me dimmed and blurred, but the music never did. It stayed sharp, always in tune. At night, I sat in bed with the headset charging beside me, dreading the morning. I was allowed to remove it during sleep, but only after completing an evening silence review. 1 word spoken, just 1, and it stayed on overnight. After a week, I didn't need reminders. The fear did it for him. And during that week, I spoke fewer words than I had in the first month of kindergarten. I started thinking in gestures, communicating in nods, eye movements, silence. He called it progress. I called it forgetting how to be human. The worst part? Some small part of me believed him, that maybe this was the only way to survive, not by escaping, but by perfecting the art of disappearing. Her name was Ms. Tarrant. She was the substitute Latin teacher, filling in for a semester while the regular one went on sabbatical. Young, sharp-eyed, and calmer than the rest of the faculty. She wore dark jeans and boots instead of the stiff skirts most teachers favored, and she didn't talk to us like we were under a microscope. I noticed her noticing me on day 3. Caleb, she said during a translation exercise, your sentence structure is flawless. I didn't respond, obviously, just nodded once and kept my head down. The Strauss Band was humming a Bach fugue in my ears. The music never stopped, not even in class. She didn't push, but she kept watching. It was during lunch break a week later when it happened. I had taken my usual spot in the corner of the library, far from the others, my silent workbook open in front of me. The Strauss Band was in full force, and my pencil tapped lightly on the side of the desk. ... At first, it was just something to do. A habit I'd picked up after learning Morse code from one of my father's old Navy books. Tapping helped me feel less alone, less erased. ... Pause. Then again, I didn't realize someone was listening until she sat down across from me. Miss Tarrant didn't say a word, just looked at my hand, then at me. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. She picked up a pen from her bag and clicked it twice. Tap, pause, tap. I stared at her. She smiled, just slightly. You know Morse, she said softly, mouthing the words more than speaking them. I nodded, barely. Her hand moved, tapping gently against the table in slow, careful rhythm. FATHER. I blinked. My hand trembled. I tapped back. HELP. She stilled. Then she nodded once and stood up like nothing had happened. That day changed everything. From then on, whenever she walked past, she tapped something small. At first, just letters, then short phrases. SDOICLM, ISEYOU. Each message landed like a light in the dark. I didn't know what she would do, or if she could actually help. But for the first time in years, I felt it. That tiny, impossible thing pressing against the weight in my chest. Hope. It started with silence from Miss Tarrant. One Monday morning, she simply didn't show up. No message from the school, no explanation. Just a different substitute reading from the textbook like the words were sandpaper. For 2 days, I waited for a tap on my desk, a passing signal, anything. Nothing came. Then, on Wednesday, I found it, folded inside a Latin grammar book someone had mis-shelved behind the geography section in the school library. A loose sheet of lined paper, hand-folded, tucked between the pages like a secret. I unfolded it carefully. Just 7 words, tapped out in Morse along the top. He did this to others. I have proof. My hand started to shake. I looked around, heart pounding, half expecting my father to be standing in the doorway with that calm, cold stare. But the room was empty. She was gone, but she had left something behind. That same week, my father visited the school under the guise of updating my performance file. I sat outside the office, headset humming, pretending not to listen. But through the cracked door, I could hear his voice, measured, smooth, full of concern. I've noticed regression in Caleb's behavior, exaggerated emotional reactions, attempt to manipulate peers and faculty. I froze. He was setting the groundwork. The next day, I was pulled into the counselor's office. Not Ms. Lennox this time, someone new. A man, sharp suit, cold smile. Caleb, your father shared some documentation with us. It seems there's been some confusion. He says you've been misrepresenting your home life. I didn't answer. Caleb, we're worried about your grasp on reality. These stories of sound punishments, forced fasting. Do you understand how that sounds? Yes, I did. It sounded insane, which made it easier for him to erase. By Friday, the school had quietly pulled back their inquiry. No more visits from child services. No more questions. No more Ms. Taryn. That night, at home, my father laid out his final move. There's been a development, he said calmly at dinner. You've been recommended for enrollment in an elite reform academy overseas, a cognitive facility for gifted children who struggle with emotional regulation. My fork clattered on the plate. You'll leave next month. Pack lightly. I stared at him, eyes wide. He smiled. It's a great honor. I tried to speak, but the music pulsing through the Strauss band drowned out my own voice. I couldn't hear my own breath. Later that night, I tapped out a message against the inside of my desk drawer, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she was still listening somehow. HELP, HELP, HELP. But there was no response. He had won this round, and I knew what that meant. Next time, he wouldn't just erase my voice. He'd erase me. He didn't wait a month. I woke up in the back seat of a car, seatbelt tight across my chest, my limbs heavy and numb. The last thing I remembered was brushing my teeth, and the bitter taste of the sleep tonic my father said was to help transition your mind. My mouth was dry. The Strauss band was still clamped to my head, but it wasn't playing music, just a soft static hiss. I couldn't sit up properly. My body was sluggish, like I was underwater. Outside the window, there was only ocean and pine trees, and then finally, nothing but gray. We stopped at a private airfield. No signs, no logos, just a man in a windbreaker and clipboard nodding us onto a small white jet. Everything arranged? My father asked. Yes, Dr. Ward. Center 12 has been prepped. Fully compliant group this quarter. He'll integrate smoothly. I wanted to scream, but all I managed was a rasp. No one reacted. I don't know how long the flight was. I drifted in and out. When I came to, the sky was dark and the air smelled like salt and antiseptic. A low gray building rose in the distance. Steel gates, blacked out windows. No sign, no welcome. Just a speaker by the door that said, "Welcome to Center 12. Compliance is cognition. Cognition is freedom." The first thing they did was take my clothes and hand me a slate gray uniform. No buttons, no zippers, no noise. Every child I saw moved and practiced silence. Faces blank, eyes dulled. I passed a girl with a bandage over her mouth, not fresh, just permanent. Another boy sat perfectly still in a white chair, staring at a blank wall, drool sliding slowly down his chin. Meals were identical, colorless cubes. A glass of water with no ice. We were given a spoon but only allowed one scoop at a time, and only after blinking 3 times at the monitoring sensor. One sound? Isolation chamber. That's what they called it. The quiet box. They showed it to us on the first day. A room the size of a closet, padded walls, no lights. You were left in there for hours. Days, maybe. I lasted a week before I slipped up. It was during a logic drill. My pencil snapped. I cursed. Just a whisper. Barely audible. The alarms flared red. A soft female voice echoed. Noise infraction. Level 1. Commencing discipline. They led me to the quiet box. No yelling. No handcuffs. Just cold hands on my arms and the sound of my own panic pounding in my ears. In the dark, time didn't pass. I hallucinated voices. I forgot my own name. I started humming Vivaldi under my breath, not because I wanted to, but because my brain didn't know what else to do. When they finally let me out, I didn't speak again, not even in my thoughts. I stopped thinking in words. I started counting instead, counting the number of spoonfuls, the blinks before permission, the footsteps in the hall. I became part of the silence, just another moving shadow. My father called once a week, a video message. Caleb is progressing well. The staff would report. Minimal resistance. Emotional flattening is on track. And he would smile, satisfied. You see, he'd say, all it took was structure. And I, who once tapped for help, who once clung to silent hope, sat with my hands flat in my lap and my eyes dull. Obedient, vanished, erased. They came during a storm. I remember the rain first, pounding against the roof of Center 12 like a drumbeat I couldn't hear through the Strauss band. But I saw the flicker of lightning outside the common room window, and then the lights cut out. The music in my ears stopped abruptly, a silence so sudden it felt like being dropped into space. Then came the alarm, and not one of Center 12's silent alerts, but something real, loud, human, yelling. I froze in my seat. So did everyone else. Dozens of us sat around the gray room, mouths closed, back straight. Even when chaos broke out in the hallway, none of us moved. We didn't know how anymore. The door burst open. A woman stepped in, soaked from the rain, breathing hard. It was Ms. Taryn. She looked exactly the same: boots, dark jeans, a soaked jacket clinging to her frame, but her face was fierce now, her eyes sharper than I'd ever seen them. She didn't say my name. She didn't need to. She knelt in front of me, pulled the Strauss band off my head, and whispered, "You're safe. It's over." I should have said something. I should have collapsed in relief, but I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but no sound came. Behind her, uniformed officers swarmed the building. 2 of them grabbed the head nurse and pushed her against the wall. Another waved a clipboard in the air. Illegal detainment. Forged medical orders. You're all under arrest. Chaos unfolded around us. Doors thrown open, records yanked from filing cabinets. kids being let out one by one. Some screamed, some just stared. A few tried to hide. None of us really understood what was happening. Then I saw her, Ms. Lennox, the school counselor from St. Meredith's. She was there too, hair pulled back, badge on her coat reading International Youth Advocacy Council. She came straight to me and put her hand gently on my shoulder. Caleb, we found the papers, the forged evaluations, the fake transfer orders. We know everything. I started shaking. You're okay now, she said. You're going to a hospital, then a real home. Through the windows, I saw agents leading other kids onto black vans, some clutching blankets, others wide-eyed and silent like me. The storm howled as they moved, but no one stopped. The final blow came hours later, after I was wrapped in warm clothes and taken to a private medical center on the mainland. The TV in the waiting room showed it all. Breaking news, prominent psychologist arrested in child isolation scheme. The photo was blurry, but I knew the face. Dr. Gerald Strauss, my father's partner in control. Next to him, my father, face stoic, hands cuffed, being led out of a courtroom. Reporters shouted questions. How long was this going on? How many kids? Was this about obedience or power? I didn't need answers. I was lying in a hospital bed, saline in my veins, the first quiet I'd known that didn't come with punishment. And for the first time since I could remember, someone asked, "Do you want to talk?" My voice cracked when I tried, barely a whisper, but I nodded. It came slowly, like unfreezing a part of me I'd buried. Yes, I rasped, please. Miss Terrence sat beside me. I never stopped looking, she said. You tapped. I listened, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I smiled. I go by my full name now, Caleb Ward Emerson. Ward was my father's surname. I kept it as a scar, a reminder. Emerson was my mother's maiden name, the one I chose when I turned 15 and finally had the right to claim something as mine. I live in Albany now, with my mom's younger brother, Uncle Greg. He's not perfect. His place smells like motor oil and burned toast half the time, but he listens. He never raises his voice, never makes silence a weapon. The first few months were the hardest. The therapist said I had complex post-traumatic mutism. I didn't speak at all at first, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't trust the space around me to hold words safely. But the quiet at Uncle Greg's place was different. It didn't press. It didn't punish. It gave me room. My therapist, Dr. Single, was patient. She let me write on a whiteboard for as long as I needed. When I did speak again, my voice came out hoarse and cautious. But every time I used it, she smiled like I was saying something brilliant, even if it was just, I'm tired, or I don't know. Eventually, I started school again, this time under my real name. No Strauss band, no censors, no notebook of infractions. I joined the debate club on a dare from a kid named Wes who sits behind me in biology. I don't win every match, but that's not the point. The point is, I speak, loudly, passionately, and no one punishes me. I've got this thing I do now. Every night before bed, I write in my journal with the loudest, clackiest pen I can find, just to hear the click, just to remind myself that sound isn't the enemy. Last week, I turned 16. They threw me a surprise party at the Youth Advocacy Center. Ms. Taryn flew in. Ms. Lennox was there too. Even some of the kids from Center 12, the ones who got placed with real families, showed up. We lit candles. We laughed. We talked. And then, after everyone quieted down, they gave me the mic. I stood in front of the podium at the annual gala for Child Recovery Alliance. My hands shook a little, but I looked out into the crowd, at faces who'd fought for me, at kids still waiting for their chance, and I spoke. My name is Caleb. I was silenced for most of my life, but I survived. I'm still here. They applauded. They stood. And just before I stepped off the stage, I leaned into the mic and tapped 3 times on the wood. ... Morse code for S. The first letter N. Still here. Still standing. Still me.